welcome to Fit to Speak. I'm Eugene Obah. So glad to have you with us. Today, I'll offer some solutions as well as a bit of a reality check surrounding the national conversation on public safety in and around our nation's capital, as well as some lighter conversation on some engagements. All that's coming up later in the show, but first, I pick up with the second part of my conversation with political commentator WayneTronics about the National Guard, along with crime and homelessness in the nation's capital, and what the path forward is. I asked him as to whether or not he believes, on the back of the Trump administration's actions, that they will, next year, in the ballot box, pay the price in the midterms.
Definitely so, but the larger question I have is he's already trying to rig the field for the midterm. That's why we have what's going on in Texas, right? Where they're trying to, gain more seats. I believe if there was an election this November, they would all be voted out, right? But in relation to U.S. Attorney Janine Pirro, the woman's an alcoholic. She's a known alcoholic, right? Pete Hegseth is an alcoholic, right? Uh, RFK Jr. is a heroin addict. You have some of these people, and you know, obviously, addiction is a disease. So I'm not trying to downplay the effects of addiction, but what I am saying is that we've had a constant conversation about DEI, people who look like you and I not being qualified for things because people who look like them felt a certain kind of way. And these people are showing themselves to be incompetent, spiteful, vindictive. I mean, there's no reason that a man, look, I'm not a fan of Subway, right? I think you can get a better sub sandwich. But if the man wanted to go to Subway and he threw his Subway sandwich in a time in which we watched people like Janine Pirro defend people on January 6th for hitting police officers with batons, right? So now someone throwing a Subway sandwich, they should be charged with a felony. That's what we're doing, right? But as it goes to the larger body politic of what the election will look like in 2026, there's no way without any sort of interference that the Republicans will win that election, right? Because you have to figure the country, by and large, sees what's happening. He has a 35 to 40% base that he can eat a baby on live TV and they would not care. The Epstein file is a prime thing about that because, again, talking about restaurants in DC, I believe it was Cosmic Pizza that was at the center of the
Yeah, I call it
Pizzagate
ping
situation.
pong, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so you have a situation, right, where these people built their identities around rooting out Democratic pedophilia. There is no red line for them. There is nothing that won't be crossed. But us regular people, yeah, we will vote them out tomorrow, but I don't trust this administration and their autocratic tendencies. I don't want to be an alarmist, but we're at a point where is if it's raining, if I say a hurricane's coming, right, and it's raining and we're all getting wet, and we're at the first stage of the hurricane, and the forecast says Category 5, am I being an alarmist because I'm saying we're in the middle of a storm? Because we're in the middle of a storm now, right? We're in the middle of Hurricane Donnie Jr., right? And I don't know how we get out of this, right? Because if we have a situation where, again, you have avowed alcoholics like Janine Pirro, that is the U.S. attorney of a major district, right? This isn't like being a U.S. attorney in North Dakota somewhere, right? Major cases are tried in this district, and she's literally abusing her power, charging a man for throwing a sandwich with a felony. So no, I believe they will do anything. I think the rest of us who have a working brain, we need to do everything in our power to be prepared to win the midterms, or otherwise, I don't know how this stops.
Wayne, it's interesting where the priorities are. And,
Mhm.
with midterms, it's going to be interesting to see because we're well over a year away from these midterms. So that is a lot of time.
Mhm.
I like what you said earlier that if these midterms were occurring this year, we may have a very, very, very different outcome while
Mhm.
this is fresh in people's minds. And in thinking about this whole Subway sandwich stuff, I found it very interesting that the man that allegedly did this was charged with a felony. But then you have Judge Janine Pirro, who apparently is saying, don't prosecute any felony carrying. I was reading Axios. Don't prosecute any felony carrying of guns. Remember that in DC, it's a felony to merely carry a gun out in public. So I guess it's like felonies for some sandwiches, and not for guns on the streets. So I guess priorities, right?
Hmm.
Priorities. Um, and thinking about one of the other priorities in DC and elsewhere is homelessness. Homelessness has always been something that has been talked about, especially in our cities. And again, I think homelessness really knows no zip code as such.
Hmm.
But then when you listen to Caroline Levitt, White House press secretary, she's like, well, if the homeless, they refuse to move from the public parks and so forth, then we are just going to take them to jail. And one of the things in looking at DC is that the encampments have been cleaned. They've been removing encampments and things. My question is, doesn't this just relocate the problem? Are they really interested in solving the issue of homelessness, or is this just a matter of relocating it?
This is all for appearances. They don't care about homelessness. They don't care about the social safety net. They don't care about any of those things. If I remember right, in 2024, the Supreme Court basically made a decision that pretty much criminalizes homelessness, right? And I believe it was stemming from a case in Tennessee that municipalities now will have, more leeway in cracking down on homelessness, right? And in our current economic environment, right, like middle class and working class people are at the breaking point, right? And this is also happening at a time where AI are starting to take a lot of good paying jobs from people, right? So if the legal precedent has been established that if you're homeless, you can go to jail, you're setting us on a pathway to have debtors' prisons again, right? Where if you get evicted, you owe the landlord, you can't pay it, you're on the street. Next thing you know, you're serving 1 to 3 years because you were in debt, right? As it pertains to the Trump administration, he only cares about, again, appearances and how things look, right? So again, you gave $100 billion plus to ICE. A quarter of that could have dealt with homelessness nationwide in this country, right? But what you're dealing with is we have air quotes Christians, right? These Christian nationalists, but what they really are sociopaths. They enjoy people suffering. I would not be surprised if we got to the point where we're starting to relive movies like The Hunger Games and The Purge, right? Because I've heard them bandy that about, right? That maybe we could get these homeless to do these challenges and the one that wins and like you're really dealing with people who they really do enjoy watching people suffer, people struggle. So they would build alligator Alcatrazes all over the country to put homeless people in it, right? Because if you hear the way they talk about undocumented people, what's the difference with homeless people, right? Okay, one is here illegally, and another one is staying on the streets illegally, right? It's not a big jump to say, okay, well, why don't we just put all these people in these unsafe places and see what happens, and so on and so forth. So, and also again, too, the World Cup is coming next year, right? So I can also see him going on a nationwide homeless purge, right? Because that typically happens. I mean, it happened in Brazil, right? Before they had the World Cup and the Olympics, I believe in the World Cup was there in 2014. They went through the favelas and they, got rid of a lot of homeless people. A lot of people would disappear. They would do the same thing here, right? Like when you're dealing with, really, this comes down if, and this is why I'm so thankful for you having me on and you guys' platform. There's not enough media people particularly corporate mainstream media people, calling this what this is. He's a dictator. It's autocracy, right? It's fascism. And in fascist situations, Mussolini is known for saying the trains must run on time, right? Doesn't matter what he did to get the trains to run on time. And that's the stages where we're at now, right? So there will be a lot of people who will be disappeared and lost into the system to appease this sick man's ego. And I'm just hopeful that, platforms like yours and more people, we really begin to speak out and the regular people, really stand up because I got long COVID, right? Long COVID has cost me well over $300,000, right? And healthcare expenses and money out of pocket, lost income, et cetera, right? I know a lot of people who have long COVID who's lost a lot of money, who's lost jobs and these sort of things. So you're one or two bad breaks away from being homeless yourself, right? Most Americans don't have $500 saved up for an emergency. So if the economy continues to go in this direction, with the tariffs and with the layoffs. This we've seen more layoffs this year than at the height of the pandemic, and it's just getting started. So as these things continue to trickle downhill, more and more people will lose their place. More and more people can find themselves on the street, and then it will become legal, not just in D.C., nationwide, to say, "Hey, you don't have a place to go. We're throwing you in state prison." And now we're all trying to escape like Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption because enough people didn't have the common sense not to vote this crazy man back in last November.
And then, it's almost like even if you put homeless people in jail,
Mhm.
then it's like, now what? It's like, now what? Where do they go?
Right.
You
You know,
know?
keep them in jail for the rest of their life, right? But it seems like that's what they're angling, right? And then there's another homeless problem that's going to become an issue at the end of 2026. Once these draconian Medicaid cuts come, there's a lot of elderly and sick people that are in nursing homes that won't have anywhere to go because Medicaid pays for a fair share of the balance of, what they're doing, right? So families won't be able to take care of these people, right? Like all these things are converging at the same time, and we're setting up a situation where he's using the incidents in the nation capital to set a precedent. And do you trust John Roberts' Supreme Court to do the right thing, right? And that's literally what we're looking at, right? Like the Supreme Court is supposed to be the backstop, and they're in bed with Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society and all of these groups that have given them a ton of money, and we're going to find ourselves where if you're homeless or even seemingly homeless, you might do end up doing 10 to 15 years in jail, right? Just because you didn't have a place to go, and that doesn't sound like the America I want to live
Yeah, certainly not. Certainly not. And what do we do in our closing time that we've got here on the program?
in. Hmm.
What do we do at this point? What can we as citizens really do about what is happening in DC? How do we, yes, do we want, I don't think there's anybody here, and all. I think the vast majority of people, they don't want crime, and
Right.
all. They don't want crime. And nobody's saying, oh, I love crime and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's like it goes back to what we've said in the early part of the program and in the first part of the conversation that nobody, it's like the messaging, that DC is just a crime haven and that sort of thing. It's just ridiculous. So how do we, solve? How do we strike a balance here? I guess in terms of solving, okay, whatever crime is happening, but then also at the same time, also thinking about having a little bit more empathy. Have
Mhm.
we lost our empathy? Because that's where I'm thinking this is, and all. It's like, yes, do I think that, yeah, things can be cleaned up? Sure, and all. But I think we've lost a bit of the empathy aspect of it. What do you think?
Well, the first thing is the biggest criminal is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? And if we deal with that issue, right, I believe the district was making progress. Again, you can't tout historic lows and drops in homicides and drops in all of these crimes and then turn around again, like you said earlier in the program, and try to make it seem like it's Mad Max, right? I do think and agree that believe since COVID, there's been something psychologically that's happened with us that's caused a lot of us to lack empathy, right? I think those of us like myself who have long COVID, who lost people close to us with COVID, it's something that's omnipresent in our life. So we think about it differently. And I think other people, because of the inconveniences of COVID, it made them feel a certain kind of way and everything is heightened, right? But I think as a community, a great, smart journalists like yourself putting out these sort of episodes and content pieces to spark dialogue, right? I believe working together and creating mutual aid networks to help, different people with different situations, right? Because again, DC's making progress, Baltimore's making progress, Chicago's making progress, and they were doing all these things before the situation came up. So I think we need to look at some of their models, and I also think that we all need to learn how to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And what I mean about that is the slightest bit of inconvenience or the slightest bit of scare tactic can turn a regular person into a quote unquote Karen, right? The first time your car gets broken into, now every crime is just out of control. You see some videos on social media, like love my uncle. He sends me videos of certain things like, hey, nephew, crime is out of control, and then I'll show him the stats. I'm like, it's not. These are not the days of Rayful Edmonds, right, in the district, right? That's
Mhm.
not what we're dealing with. We're not looking at a 700 body murder count, right?
Yeah, especially in the
So
90s, and all that. Yeah.
Right, right, right. So that's not where we're at. Again, things happen. People get shot. Definitely not trying to minimize that. But I believe the social media algorithms play a big part into it as well because again, you see certain things, people share certain videos, it gets embedded in your mind. You don't want that to happen to you. I've seen certain black conservative types say, yeah, he needs to come in and clean up the district without again thinking about the constitutional implications, the legal ramifications, all of these things because again they're looking for short-term comfort, right, that's going to end up with long-term pain, right, because if we allow the district to fall, that it's normalized for them to have troops on the street. LA's next. If Mom Donnie wins in New York, he can't wait to do a federal takeover there, right? So I believe we need to have more conversations. I believe we all need to find more ways to work with each other. I believe that across political divide, whether it be a more far left person with a centrist person, right? I know the quote unquote Bernie types versus the Kamala types, there's always some disconnect there. I believe we need to find some common ground to work together because if we don't, and if they are able to maintain the House and the Senate in the 2026 election, DC is going to be like this in perpetuity, right? Because if there's a Democratic majority in the House, at least, you can now make it legal that he has to remove these troops. As long as the GOP is in control, it's going to be this way. So it's up to us to dig deeper. It's up to us to figure out all the different ways we can make things uncomfortable for them, right? And for us to not lose sight in our uncomfortability about what's happening, that there's a bigger picture here, and we all need to work together to stop this tyrant from taking over not just DC but the whole country.
Hmm. I really like, and especially now what you said in terms of, I guess sort of the confirmation bias that I think some
Hmm.
people have got in terms of the algorithms. I never really even thought about that until now because if you think about even this platform that we're on, YouTube, if
Hmm.
I'm watching or somebody else watches certain videos, of, oh, there was a stabbing, oh, there was somebody breaking into windows, the
Hmm.
algorithms are going to feed you more of that. And
Hmm.
then it's like, oh, well, again, then it paints that perception of DC being, oh, this crime zone and things. And again, of course, you and I, we're definitely, and I want people to know watching this program, we're not minimizing anything that happens to anybody. Certainly not. We're not minimizing, anything that happens to anybody. But then to extrapolate that to the entire city, is just the way I look at it is just wrong. Again, I've been in media for 15 years, in the DMV in DC, and I can honestly tell you that this is DC is truly a vibrant community. I mean, a city. It's a vibrant city. Can there be more stuff? Oh, absolutely. There's always room for improvement. Always room for improvement, and anywhere. But I think by and large, what is just happening in this society, we need to get our empathy back. We do need to, as you said, talk to people. We need to have conversations in good faith. It's become, I was talking with somebody about this the other day, it's become a bit of a lost art form. And, I think, and I'm thinking about it more, I think COVID kind of sort of tipped that, that point, right there. And of course, the isolation and that sort of thing. Of course, we have to do what we have to do. Um, but, getting people together, having conversations like this on this program and hopefully other programs, I think independent media is really, truly the way forward in a lot of this. And I am glad that really we are fortunate to be able to bring this platform to our viewers and to folks like yourself, WayneTronics. So again, WayneTronics, political commentator. This has been a great conversation. I hope that people really take the time and really listen to this. And I hope we get to have you back on this show and to continue to do this stuff as long as we possibly can. So, WayneTronics, political commentator, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
To see the first part of my interview with WayneTronics, do check it out right here on this YouTube channel, youtube.com/the CSE channel. Click the iCard on the top right of the screen or the link on the bottom of the video in the description. Recently, pop sensation Taylor Swift and Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce got engaged. I cannot say that I'm a hardcore Swiftie or that I'm really moved by the nuptials, impending nuptials of celebrities, but I certainly do not mind Taylor, and I certainly appreciate her talent, unlike some of the NFL contingents, many of whom I'm sure watched on the day of Lee Corso's farewell on College Game Day, the debut of 48-year-old frat bro, excuse me, sorry, Barstool founder Dave Portnoy this past weekend on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff. Anyway, Taylor's business acumen, not to mention the value she's brought to the Chiefs and really the league as a whole, speaks for itself. Oh yes, Travis Kelce is pretty cool too. Congratulations to the lovely couple whose marriage, I'm sure, will last longer than Fox's marriage to Portnoy, who will no doubt eventually tell him to shut up! What's not so lovely is that as many have now headed back to school, another mass shooting occurred, this time in Minnesota, where 2 children were killed and 17 were injured. The shooter, since deceased, shot through church windows. The common refrain from much of the public and our politicians, a lot of our politicians, has been thoughts and prayers. And yet, even with all those, this happened. When do we stop, folks? When do we stop, folks? As harsh as this may sound, when do we stop with the platitudes? When do we stop with the platitudes? After all, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. As we continue the conversation about the efficacy, such that it is, of the National Guard and public safety, and there have been results, according to DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, with this. The question is, does killing a rat with a blowtorch, which this whole operation essentially is, does killing a rat with a blowtorch solve the issues of crime in the nation's capital, or really elsewhere for that matter? Or is this a mere band-aid? I mean, yes, you'll kill the rat, all right. And yes, quite candidly, we do need to do something about the rat population in DC. But at what cost? You leave a lot of damage. You end up leaving a lot of damage in its wake, including excessive charges and leaving charred taxpayer dollars in the process. In fact, it was Robert Reich who cited that it is much less expensive to house the homeless than it is to have the National Guard in DC for 3 months. It also should be very comforting, oh so comforting, that 20 federal police arrested the Subway sandwich guy who's accused of throwing a footlong at one officer. Talk about taxpayer dollars at work. Where's Doge when you need him? Where's Elon, huh? It's pretty quiet as of late. Again, this is not condoning the alleged actions. It's not. But seriously, just to put this show of force in perspective, it took 25 Navy SEALs to kill Osama bin Laden. 25 Navy SEALs to kill Osama bin Laden. It took 20 cops to catch the Subway sandwich guy. This, after he already turned himself in. We need a paradigm shift in this society. We really do. We need a radical rethink of our legislation, our laws, and an equally radical rethink of how we fight crime in this country. You know, a good start in that would be redirecting the resources and responsibilities of law enforcement to focus on crimes with actual victims: murder, assault, burglary, carjacking, theft, arson, and the like. Basically, any crime, even those that are not on this list, where a human or animal is killed or injured, as opposed to, say, the victimless crimes, all right, if we are able to focus on crime where somebody is killed or injured, as opposed to these kind of sort of woulda, coulda, shoulda type crimes, as I call them, you know, won't somebody think of the children, right? Sort of stuff. I think that will be a very, 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 very nice start indeed. It would also unclog our court systems as well. This all goes way back, actually. Even I found this. This was from 1922 from the Marquette Law Review from Harry M. Doherty, who served as the U.S. Attorney General. And I want to read this part here that really illustrates this perfectly. It says here, quote, "It is no uncommon thing for a district court docket to be from 6 months to 2 years in arrears. This naturally means loss of evidence, death of witnesses, defeat of justice, and expense to taxpayers. Many cases can never be tried." Goes to show you that the silver bullet in solving crime, and really the status quo, has just not worked. It really hasn't. And the more contemporary person has said as much in her book, Judge Judy Scheindlin, "Don't Pee Me on My Leg and Tell Me It's Raining." As it stands now, the declaration of Section 740 by the president is really nothing more than a dog and pony show designed to run away from Jeffrey Epstein. If the president was actually serious about solving crime, not just in DC, but throughout this country, he will have constructively engaged in this national conversation long before now. He would have done so long before now. And really, when you look at some of these other countries, America really isn't all that safe. It really is not a model for safety. According to the Global Peace Index, Iceland, Ireland, New Zealand, Austria, Switzerland, Singapore, Portugal, Denmark, Slovenia, and Finland are in the top 10. Canada, our neighbor to the north, is tied with the Netherlands in about the middle part of the top 20. The US, 128th. 128th. Guess maybe it's not a bad idea, I guess, for Canada to be the 51st state. You know, in the Brady Bunch, it was Mike Brady who said to Peter Brady that if you don't like something, fix it. Well, if this stuff is anything to go by, there's a hell of a lot of fixing that needs to be done here, folks. Hell of a lot of fixing. Think about what the top countries have in common. Maybe, just maybe, we can learn a little something. And maybe we can put the same energy into that as the level of outrage over a restaurant's freaking logo. One could only hope. Thank you so much for watching. Listen, there's going to be a lot more where that came from, so you better stay tuned to catch it all. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media accounts for more information, including all of the bonus content that you'll see for today's show. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell on our YouTube channel so that you do not miss any of our episodes. And do consider subscribing to our Substack page, csamedia.substack.com, to support all of the work that we do here. Until next time, I'm Eugene Obah, and remember, we will not be silenced.